Welcome, everyone, to this month's second Tuesday webinar series. This month's seminar is on the importance of color conformance to financial performance. Brings us to the importance of color conformance to financial stakeholders within printing companies. So this is our agenda for this month's session. And this month's session is designed to be fairly fast so that we know your time is valuable. And it's really the return on investment that a color conformance platform provides, a print quality platform. So number one is waste kills profitability and sustainability. And Idea Alliance has been talking about it. Printing United has been talking about it. If you're a printer, it's all about sustainability and improving profitability, which means decreasing waste. And communicating waste is key. ChromaChecker is the only only quality program that allows you to define what is waste and what is sellable and communicate it to all operators, all service, all sales, all management, even customers, so that when a print comes off of a printer and it's measured using ChromaChecker, it gives you, is the expectation factor passing or is it failing? It's not some scorecard, which is arbitrary, which doesn't really relate to visual performance of how well two prints are matching or a print is matching a given reference condition. This is unique, and it's unique to ChromaChecker. And by having this function and with our tools, you can have faster preparation, faster make ready to know that what you're doing is sellable. And it's really the next step after G7 and G7 Plus, because G7, just because you're G7 doesn't mean it's sellable. And just because it's not G7 doesn't mean it's not sellable. Knowing whether or not your print is sellable is key to eliminating waste. And being able to quantify accuracy per your customer's expectations is really critical in terms of moving forward with a profitable company. So, talking about Printing United just published an article by Kieran, a good associate of mine. He's global senior expert of color management at Sigwork, a very large printing company in Europe. And his article is all about color workflow, reasonable tolerances, and validating prints. And if I just pop out of my presentation for a second, and I can show you here's the link that's listed in the presentation on his article about sustainability. And when he talks about sustainability, it just dovetails so perfectly with all aspects of ChromaChecker, whether it's managing spot colors, sensible tolerances, expanded color gamut printing, and validation. All aligns really well with what ChromaChecker provides our customers. So please take a look at this article, and it's really good by Kieran. Now, when we talk about what level of color match, this is really designed for financial stakeholders to really understand what ChromaChecker is doing. If you're not checking your color, if you're aiming for the bullseye on the target on the left and you're printing different every day, you have no color control. If you have just calibration, you have the second set of printers. So your printer's consistent, but they're not necessarily accurate. If you do G7 curves, you might have some level of accuracy. It might be good enough, it might not. It depends upon your customers. But if you have both what's called characterization, which is ICC profiling, and good conversions, then you're clustered around the bullseye. And you can quantify these levels of precision and accuracy using this metric called E factor. And this is what allows you to really define what is sellable work and what isn't. And when we talk about sellable work, it's greatly dependent on the printing device. If you have a conventional printing device, if you look at the device on the left, your level of E factor, meaning the level of accuracy and precision, is probably not going to be so great as the new press on the right. And consumables play a lot into this. And I actually took this picture a few weeks ago. This is magenta ink. Same manufacturer, two buckets of magenta ink, very different just visually looking at it. You can't have this level of inconsistency if you're a quality printer and trying to get quality work. And the same goes with substrates. If you're buying the paper of the month because it's the cheapest and it's changing it every month, you can't keep your printers consistent and accurate. It's just not possible. And if you're dealing with digital presses, it's the same type of thing. Manufacturers don't publish accuracy numbers in terms of how precise and accurate presses can be. But you know, the press on the left isn't nearly as accurate as the one on the right, generally, right? So having a system like ChromaChecker to be able to quantify what the E factor, what the expectation factor is in terms of level of color match, what these presses are capable of doing before you buy the printer is really important. And and you have to remember that there's two parts to this. Not only does the printer have to be consistent to itself, but it has to be consistent to the other printers that you're printing with, because oftentimes you're sharing work between the printers, and you don't want to have to say, oh, all our work for this customer is going to go off this one printer. You want to be able to print it on any printer and have all the prints match. So do your printers align? Um, Most companies, when they get ChromaChecker, they understand what non-alignment means. So typically, companies that are not looking at color, not measuring color, are over on the left, where they have no color control. The E factor is fairly high. They're crossing their fingers that the customer is going to accept it. And then as you move to the right and you control your processes and your variables, you can get your E factor very small. Now, you might not have to be all the way on the right. You might be able to get away with just a G7 curve, which typically gives you a 4 to 6 E factor. And 4 to 6 E factor for the majority of print buyers out there, well, I'll say 50% of the print buyers, because 4.5 is kind of that magic number that if you're below 4.5, more than 50% of the print buyers are going to accept it. If you're more than 4.5, then you're crossing your fingers that they're going to accept it. So this is where being able to dial your printers in, not only to the reference, but to one another. That's the key part, is dialing into one another. And we're going to talk about that a little later. Um, and it's all about establishing your minimum quality requirements. James Maxwell said it very well. It's a matter of balancing economy against quality. Most management they want the printer to run flat out as fast as it can. Just get the quality out there. And if you only had to put black ink on it, so it was just black and white, you'd get really fast. But obviously, if you're trying to sell a color print, customer's not going to accept a black and white print. So you've got to define what your minimum level of throughput is to get that level of quality, because too much throughput means too little quality, you lose customers. Where too little throughput, you lose money. So you have to find this equilibrium in terms of what is your company's optimum expectation factor or E factor for a color match, and then drive your throughput to that level of a color match. So the E factor exercise is available online or hard copy, which allows you to understand what a 2 E factor looks like versus a 5 E factor versus an 8 E factor. And with ChromaChecker, once you take a target and print it and measure it, ChromaChecker will tell you what the E factor is. And if you've ever done any type of G7 qualification work where you've sent your data in, you can take that data that you've already got, bring it into ChromaChecker. ChromaChecker will tell you what your E factor is for your printers. So this gives you a great awareness of how accurate and precise your printers are, not only to, let's say, a Graco reference, but more importantly, to one another. And aligning the printer accuracy to customer expectations is key to profitability. So when we come back here, you define the production capability of all your devices and your operators, and you go accordingly. So as we talk about printers not matching, whether job to job or between jobs, you have this level of inconsistency within presses and digital presses. And so being able to know precisely what the E factor is for each of these jobs is key. So we might have our offset press of 4 and our digital press of 2, which is great. But if we're trying to mix and match the same job on both presses, you could have an 8 E factor in terms of the difference between the two presses, and nobody will accept an 8. So this is where a lot of management gets, shall we say, eyes gloss over and they don't quite understand. This graphic really shows that you're trying to hit grackle, which is the red bullseye, and the press, the digital press, you're 2, and the offset press, you might be 4, but you're on opposite ends of the bullseye, and so you have a much bigger difference. Having a quality platform like ChromaChecker helps you dial these presses into one another so you're not just guessing. And when we talk about waste killing profitability, Printing United did a survey a couple of years ago, and they showed that 3/4 of the printers, so 75% of printers, make less than 2% margin on sales, which means if you lose on one job $200, that requires $10,000 of additional sales just to cover that one loss. Most printers don't understand this math. And it's so important that you can't afford any waste. And ChromaChecker, if ChromaChecker saves one $200 waste per 2 years, it's paid for using ChromaChecker on 10 printing devices. ChromaChecker is so inexpensive related to the amount of waste that it saves, and it turns into profitability. And to give you an idea, digital operator using ChromaChecker, before they start their job, before they print their first print off that digital press, they should print out a QC strip, read it into ChromaChecker, and if it's green, you see the dot on the bullseye, they're good to go. And if it's red, they're not good to go. And oftentimes, it'll tell you why it's red. So here, if you're using a large format inkjet printer, it's saying alert, the magenta nozzle appears clogged. Please clean it. And it can even give you a link on how to clean it for an Arizona versus a Colorado versus an Inca. So this is the type of value that a ChromaChecker platform gives you so that the operator, even if they were flipping burgers last week, go in and clean the magenta nozzle and get that printer printing sellable color again very quickly. Now, very easy to quantify your printing devices. We have a target, free target that you see here, printed out on all your printing devices, measured in with an inexpensive device like an i1, and ChromaChecker will tell you what the E factor is for each of the printers related to, let's say, Grackle or ISO-coded. And then you can go further and you can say, hey, how close is my Epson printing to my Inca? And ChromaChecker will tell you. And when you have something like this, my Inca versus my Zycon, it's 8.6 E factor. That anything more than 8, no customer will accept. So you know you have a problem. But again, when you compare these two printers in ChromaChecker, we tell you the difference between the substrates is greater than 2. It's 6.6. If you choose a substrate, which ChromaChecker helps you find the best match substrate to match the Zycon to the Inca or the Inca to the Zycon, if you match the substrate, naturally the color is going to match better. So again, ChromaChecker tells you why your printers aren't aligning to one another and what you need to do to help fix that to make them align to one another. And again, here's a link that I put in the presentation. So if you have your data that you've submitted to Idea Alliance for your G7 qualification, I'm just going to go in here and grab, these are 5 press submissions that I've done for different customers over the last year or so. And I'm bringing those into ChromaChecker, and ChromaChecker brings them in, and it shows us that of each of these five measurements, they're all passing G7, which is great because they're G7 submissions. Now, it also quantifies what the E factor is in terms of how accurate they are to Grackle. Now, some G7 experts even will really not know what I'm talking about here. And all it means is that the lower the E factor, the more accurate the print is to the true Grackle uh, profile. So you see here, I've got presses that are 2.2, 2.9, 3.7, 3.9. These are incredibly small E factor numbers for presses, but they're ChromaChecker users. So they know what they're doing from a quality perspective. Now, one here is kind of a black horse at 7.1, but um, it's acceptable to them, meaning they're making money at a 7.1. You don't want to be a 2.2 if your customers are 7. You're losing money if you're doing that. So better, lower E factor isn't always better. Now, what I can do is I can come in here and I can click on these measurements, and I can go here and I can say compare. And so now, instead of comparing each of the printers to the reference, this shows the screenshot that I showed you. It's showing each of the presses to one another. So press D versus press C is a 6.6, 3.4, 4.0, 4.7. So press D versus the four other presses in here are ranging between 3.4 and 6.6 E factor. Press B is ranging from 6.6 to 8.3 E factor. And these are fairly big numbers. 8.3, like I said, no one will accept the difference. And if these are five presses from five different companies, so I'm not expecting them to align, but this is a fantastic exercise for you to know whether or not your presses are aligning. And if they're not aligning, like this press, you see the warning sign here. When I click on that, it says, hey, well, the difference between the substrates is more than 2, it's 3.6. Use ChromaChecker to find a closer matching substrate, and you'll naturally be able to get these presses to match closer together. So please ask your tech people, what is the E factor of your printing devices, and what's the E factor of the printing devices to one another? This is really useful information. Now, this is a new feature that I referred to earlier called a job setup assistant, which allows you to export an XML data from your MIS system and bring it into ChromaChecker and pre-populate the job based on the color bar, the colors that you're using, the tolerances, and so forth. And one of our beta users runs 12 jobs per day and 2 presses, 280 days per year. And they're saying they're saving an hour per press per day in terms of make ready time because of this new job setup assistant. Their press time $750 an hour. So they're saving $750 a day per press because of this new job setup assistant. If you're doing packaging work, you've got to look at this. This 1 year, $210,000 of savings. And the license is a fraction. I mean, the license is like $1,000 a year. So it's a no-brainer in terms of the ROI and the savings that it provides you. In addition, ChromaChecker gives you weekly reporting, weekly and monthly reporting it's automatically emailed out of the system. So it shows you how each press is performing, how each department's performed, shows you against the average, even sends it to each operator or each department manager to see if their presses are performing above the line or below the line. So it's all about continuous improvement and knowledge and helping everybody run to the given E factor that's desired. And many of our customers will put this dashboard up on their wall in their plant room showing each press. So I have an Epson, an Indigo, a Man Roland. And if it's green on the right, it's good. If it's red, it's not so good. It's not sellable. And each of the variables that are important to be in line have to be read as well, whether it's the instrument, the lighting, the fountain solution, the nip pressures, the substrate. All these variables are tracked within ChromaChecker, so you know that everybody within the organization has an icon on this dashboard, and everybody in the company, as they're walking by the 50-inch monitor on the screen on the wall, which has this data on there, it's all real time. So if their icon turns yellow, meaning it hasn't been checked within the allotted time period, or worse, it turns red, meaning it's been checked and it's wrong, they're going to get on that in a heartbeat to get it fixed and get it right. And I've had owners of print shops hug me because they said before ChromaChecker, every employee had a paddle and would use it to blame somebody else. After ChromaChecker, everybody knew that what they needed to do with the paddle and knew what everybody else needed to do with the paddle, and and they were on the same page. The boat was rowing in the same direction, and the owner has such a high degree of knowledge of what's actually happening on the plant floor that they're not surprised. They're up to date every minute when they look at that dashboard that everything is running as it should be or it's not, and that there's resources being applied to fix that. So, in summary, aligning printers and expectations is critical to profitability. You need to be able to measure color into ChromaChecker, and you get automatic reports. These reports build up over time. They can be given to customers, which customers just love this type of thing. You can know how accurate each printer is. You fix the worst one first and then fix the second worst one next. Conventional presses, so many companies still work off something called an OK sheet. Now you can require the OK sheet to be within a certain E factor. So press operator, you cannot pull an OK sheet until the E factor is, let's say, less than 5. And now all your operators are running at the same level of quality. And ChromaChecker tracks the make ready, so you can tell which press operators are taking more make ready to get to the same level of quality, let's say a 5E factor, than the other press operator, so you can apply the right training to the press operator who's taking a long time to get to a 5E factor so that you can get standardization across your press room, across the operators, across different facilities. And digital press operators, same thing, really easy to train them on how to measure color. This tells you when you need to update your curves or your G7 profiles to keep your presses coming back into the approved level of E factor, and getting the printers all aligned. And then one of the key things I want to leave you with is before purchasing a new printer, ChromaCheck it. Use ChromaChecker to benchmark the printer to know whether or not it will align with your existing devices. I'm sure every one of you has bought a printer at some point or another, and you tried to make it work within your environment, but it printed so differently that you couldn't make it work. Wouldn't it be nice to know that ahead of time? So with ChromaChecker, we have a benchmarking process that allows you to check and see if your new printer aligns with your 5 existing printers, or if it's so far out in left field that you can't get it to align, you don't want to buy that printer. So include the ChromaChecker champion, include the color management champion in your company in your decision-making process before you buy any type of printer. This will save so many headaches, and you'll know what you're getting into before you start going through the install and wondering whether or not the install was done right and whether or not the press was right. Have it done ahead of time so you know what the E factor is that you're expecting. And then you can put that as part of the PO agreement for the printer that, hey, I'm not going to pay you until I got this printer printing to, let's say, a 4E factor. And now you've got performance guidelines on how to implement this printer within your organization. And there's no surprises. This printer will work for what you want it to do. And we're going to go into a series of how to do these benchmarking devices pretty quickly here. It could be next month because it's such an important aspect of knowing that new printers that you're bringing into the fold are actually capable of producing what you want to produce. So that concludes our session for this month. I hope you enjoyed it. Please ask any questions at this point, and feel free to email us with any questions or suggestions as you come up with them. Thank you very much and have a great day.